It started with a phone call. 911, what's your emergency? My daughter, she's missing. Lisa Carter's voice trembled, barely above a whisper. The dispatcher, trained for these calls, stayed calm. How long has she been gone? She was supposed to be home at 4. It's almost midnight. The operator's fingers moved swiftly over the keyboard. What's her name? Emily Carter, Lisa swallowed, struggling to keep her emotions in check. She's 17, 5'6", brown hair, blue eyes. She was wearing a red hoodie and jeans when she left school. The dispatcher reassured her, but Lisa barely heard. Something deep in her gut told her this wasn't just a case of a teenager staying out too late. Within the hour, the Millwood Police Department was involved. A patrol car rolled up to the Carters' house, its lights painting eerie blue and red flashes across the quiet suburban street. Detective Sarah Monroe arrived soon after, stepping out of her unmarked sedan. She was a woman who had seen enough in her years on the force to recognize when something wasn't right. Emily wasn't the type to vanish. She was responsible, disciplined, the kind of girl who texted her mom if she'd be 5 minutes late. Yet, since 3:45 p.m., her phone had been completely silent. Monroe questioned Lisa and Daniel Carter, her father. Their answers were consistent. Emily wasn't involved in anything risky, no fights, no boyfriend drama, nothing that suggested she had run away. Security footage from the school parking lot provided the first lead. It showed Emily walking toward Main Street, alone. No one followed her, no strange vehicles lingered. Yet, somewhere between that last recorded moment and her supposed route home, Emily had vanished. As night deepened, search teams spread across Millwood. They checked her usual spots: the library, the soccer field, the coffee shop where she did homework. Nothing. It was like she had stepped off the edge of the world. Then, at 3 a.m., an officer called in. "We just got a hit on Emily's phone." Monroe's grip tightened on the radio. "Where?" A long pause. 30 miles from here. Deep in Pinewood Forest. Image prompt for Chapter 1. By morning, the entire town of Millwood was on edge. What started as a late-night worry had escalated into a full-blown emergency. Emily Carter was missing, and the longer she was gone, the worse the chances of finding her safe became. Detective Sarah Monroe stood in front of the Carter home, gripping a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a grayish hue over the neighborhood. Flyers with Emily's smiling face were being printed in bulk, and the local news station had already picked up the story. Emily wasn't just any teenager, she was the kind of girl people noticed. Star soccer player, honor roll student, beloved by teachers and classmates alike. If she had been in trouble, someone would have known. But no one had come forward. Inside the Carter house, Lisa Carter sat on the couch, clutching her daughter's favorite hoodie. Daniel Carter paced back and forth, his hands in fists. The helplessness was unbearable. Monroe needed leads. "Let's start from the last place she was seen," she told her team. The security footage at Millwood High showed Emily leaving school alone at 3:45 p.m., heading down Main Street. That should have placed her home by 4 p.m. at the latest, but somewhere along that short walk, she had disappeared. Monroe questioned Emily's friends, teachers, and anyone who might have seen her that day. "She seemed off," said Jake Lawson, a classmate. "She was on her phone a lot, texting someone, but she wouldn't say who." That was their first real clue. Who had Emily been talking to? The bigger shock came when Emily's phone finally pinged a tower. Not in Millwood, not even in a nearby town. "Her phone just registered near Pinewood Forest," an officer announced. Monroe's stomach twisted. That was 30 miles away. Emily had no reason to be there. "Get a search team out there," she ordered. "Now!" As officers and volunteers gathered supplies, Lisa Carter clutched Monroe's hand, eyes wide with fear. "Please," she whispered, "find my daughter." Monroe nodded, determination hardening her expression. They would find Emily. One way or another. The entrance to Pinewood Forest was marked by a rusted old sign, barely legible through years of neglect. A cold wind whistled through the towering pines, their branches swaying like silent sentinels watching over the unknown. Detective Sarah Monroe adjusted the strap of her flashlight and exchanged a glance with Officer Grant. The search team had fanned out, their flashlights slicing through the early morning fog. The deeper they ventured, the quieter the world became. No rustling leaves, no bird song, just an eerie stillness. Then a search dog let out a sharp bark. Monroe rushed forward, her boots crunching on damp leaves. The dog had stopped near a pile of debris, twigs, rocks, and fallen branches. At first, it looked like nothing, but then she saw it. Emily's backpack. It was half buried, deliberately hidden. Monroe knelt, brushing away the dirt. The bag was zipped shut, its contents undisturbed. Textbooks, a phone charger, a granola bar, no phone, no wallet, no signs of struggle. This wasn't dropped. Someone put it here, she murmured. A few feet away, Officer Grant made another discovery, a torn piece of red fabric stuck to a thorn bush. Monroe's breath caught in her throat. Emily had been wearing a red hoodie. The team pressed forward, hearts pounding. Their radios crackled with updates. Nothing yet, just endless trees, rocks, and shadows stretching in every direction. Then came a whisper of movement. "Did you hear that?" Grant asked, his hand instinctively hovering over his holster. A low whistle echoed through the trees. Haunting. Familiar. Monroe spun around, scanning the darkness. "Who's there?" No answer. Then, a footprint, larger than Emily's, fresh, leading deeper into the woods. Monroe's gut twisted. Emily wasn't alone when she came here. Someone had brought her, and someone was still out here. The search continued, but as the sun began to rise, one grim realization sank in. They weren't just searching for a missing girl anymore. They were tracking someone who didn't want to be found. Back in Millwood, the town was buzzing with fear and speculation. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some believed Emily had run away, others whispered about an abduction. But Detective Sarah Monroe focused on facts. And the latest fact had come from a gas station attendant who claimed to have seen Emily 2 nights ago. Monroe and Officer Grant arrived at the small, rundown station on the outskirts of town. The air smelled of gasoline and stale coffee. The cashier, a tired-looking man in his 50s, wiped his hands on a rag as they approached. "I'm telling you, she was here," he insisted, nodding toward the security cameras. "She wasn't alone, either." Monroe leaned in. Who was she with? The man hesitated. Some older guy, mid-40s, scruffy beard, blue flannel, drove an old pickup. Blue, I think. She didn't look scared, though. Looked like she knew him. Monroe's stomach tightened. Can we see the footage?" The grainy black and white footage showed Emily stepping out of the truck. She walked inside, bought a bottle of water, and returned to the passenger seat. No signs of distress. But why would she be with a grown man no one recognized? Monroe took a screenshot of the driver's face and sent it back to the station for identification. An hour later, the call came in. "Detective, we've got a name. James Walker." Monroe's fingers curled around her phone. "Who is he?" Silence on the other end. Then, "You're going to want to tell the parents. Daniel Carter knows him." Back at the Carter household, Daniel's face went pale when Monroe showed him the image. His voice wavered. That's James Walker." Lisa Carter gasped. "Who is he?" Daniel exhaled, rubbing his temples. "We were friends. A long time ago, before Lisa and I got married. But James, he changed. He got in trouble, assault charges in another county. We lost touch." Monroe's blood ran cold. "Why would he be with your daughter?" Daniel shook his head, his expression torn between guilt and terror. "I have no idea." Monroe didn't believe in coincidences. Walker wasn't just an old friend. He was a man with a criminal past. And he had Emily Detective Sarah Monroe barely gave Daniel Carter time to process before she snapped into action. "Where would Walker take her?" she demanded. Daniel shook his head, still in shock. I don't know. We haven't spoken in years." Lisa clutched his arm. "Think, Daniel, he has our daughter." Monroe stepped away, her mind working fast. Emily had been missing for over 36 hours. Every second counted. She called dispatch. Put out an APB on James Walker and a blue pickup truck. I want his last known addresses, family connections, anything. Within minutes, information flooded in. Walker had no current residence, but he had recently been spotted near an abandoned hunting cabin just 5 miles past Pinewood Forest. Monroe's grip tightened on the steering wheel as she sped toward the location, Officer Grant beside her. If he's there, he won't go down easy. They arrived in a remote clearing. A single run-down cabin stood against the backdrop of the towering trees, its wooden panels warped with age. The blue pickup was parked outside. Monroe's pulse quickened. Emily was here. She signaled for backup and drew her weapon. No risks, no mistakes. They moved toward the cabin in near silence. A single light flickered inside. The air was thick with tension. Then, a sound. A faint cry. Monroe's heart pounded. She motioned to Grant, and on her signal, they burst through the door. Inside, James Walker stood frozen, his eyes wide with shock. Behind him, Emily sat tied to a chair, her face pale but alive. "Police, hands up," Monroe barked. Walker hesitated, then bolted for the back door. Grant tackled him before he could escape, wrestling him to the ground. Monroe rushed to Emily, cutting the ropes from her wrists. Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks. "He said my dad owed him, that he just wanted to talk." Monroe's jaw clenched. This wasn't just an abduction. This was personal. As backup swarmed the cabin, Walker was hauled to his feet, his face contorted in rage. "This isn't over," he spat. But Monroe wasn't listening. She had only one focus: getting Emily home. Emily Carter was safe. But safety wasn't the same as being okay. Detective Sarah Monroe stood in the Carters' living room, watching as Lisa Carter clung to her daughter, tears spilling freely. Daniel stood nearby, his expression twisted with guilt. Emily was home, physically unharmed, but something in her eyes had changed. The Millwood Police Department had Walker in custody. He wasn't talking much, but what he had said sent a chill through Monroe. This wasn't about her, it was about him, Walker had sneered, nodding toward Daniel's picture in Emily's house. "Your perfect little dad isn't who you think he is." Monroe had pressed Daniel for answers, but he had only muttered, "It was a long time ago." Emily hadn't spoken much since being rescued. She sat on the couch, arms wrapped around herself, as if trying to shrink into nothingness. She had been taken by someone she thought she could trust. Lisa stroked her daughter's hair. "Baby, we're here. You're safe now." Emily's voice was small. "I don't feel safe." Monroe knew that feeling wouldn't go away overnight. Maybe not ever. Trauma wasn't something that disappeared just because the danger was gone. The town of Millwood was relieved, but whispers still circulated. Why had James Walker taken her? What was the connection? Daniel finally broke his silence late that night. Monroe sat with him on the porch, the weight of the case still pressing on her shoulders. "I used to know Walker," he admitted, staring into the darkness. "Back in my 20s, I got mixed up with the wrong crowd, owed money. Walker took the fall for something I should have paid for. He went to prison. I got my life together." He exhaled sharply. "I thought it was over." Monroe's jaw tightened. "It wasn't." "No," his voice cracked, "and Emily paid for it." Inside, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The house, her home, felt different. She had learned something horrifying. The world wasn't as safe as she had believed. Monroe left the Carters' home knowing one thing for certain. This case wasn't over. Because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried.